Bryan Kandel has worked with us at Voces for many years now. But before then, he was writing novels, and many of you probably have read some of his novels like Los Sobrevivientes. The Recently, he did one that takes place in Pamplona. I can't say that word all of a sudden, but
Pamplona.
yes, thank you. That is about like that takes place during the running of the bulls. Um, and then some other just wonderful novels. And he just released two new novels. Um, and he'll be telling you more about those today. And of course, as an author and as a teacher himself, he uses novels and stories in his own class. So really, this webinar will, relate to any language teacher, no matter what language you teach. And a, and if you're interested in possibly winning copies of each of the novels, he'll be doing some trivia later on, and then we'll be just giving away some as well before the end of the webinar. So more details to come there. And as I mentioned earlier, this is being recorded. So no matter what, as long as you registered, you'll receive a copy afterwards. I'll be emailing it out. And if you do win a set of the novels, I'll be in the chat making sure that you have my email, and you can email me, and we'll be exchanging the information to make sure you get what you won. And of course, if you have any questions along the way, I'll be attending the chat, and you can email me at erina@vocesdigital.com, which I'll put in the chat in a moment. So welcome, Bryan, again, and you can take it from here.
Okay, can you see my screen?
Yep.
Okay, good. I have updated some things on this computer, and so I just went to share my screen, and it asked me some questions, and I was afraid it was going to restart, but I think we're good. So hello and welcome. And I do have, I have like 10 different trivia questions, Aaron, so we can see how it goes. And I forget what else I was going to ask, but we're going to do, we'll do that throughout this, and Aaron can take care of getting you some prizes and trivia and so we'll get into it. We shouldn't be too long. We'll have some time at the end for question and answers. If you have question and answers, we're going to talk a lot about reading, and we're going to look into some of these new novels a little bit. And yes, so today, November 8th, we're talking about ramping up reading world language classes. We're going to talk about in-person live classes. We're going to talk about remote or virtual classes as well, and how it applies there. Thanks again to Voces Digital for putting this on, and for promoting reading and promoting readers in a lot of different ways, and a few different languages. So let's do one now. Aaron, can we do a trivia question now? Okay. So this would be for those who are here early and early birds. And so I have two different questions here, and we'll do the chat. We'll just see whoever answers first correctly in the chat wins, right? Okay. So have access to the chat. And here's my first question. The first question actually is related to this novel here, Bella Durmiente, which is being released now. And it is set in this place. This is the city or the village of Rinconada, which is, I believe, the highest inhabited city in the world. And the trivia question is, what country is this in? So the first person that can respond in the chat to tell me what country this city is in will be a winner.
I believe the first one was Kimberly.
All right. And Kimberly said? I'm not looking at the chat. Did Kimberly say Peru?
Yes, she did.
All right, good. She said Peru. We might run into a little trouble here, Aaron, if you don't know the answer to the questions, and I don't see the chat, but I'll make sure I can see the chat. So good. So Kimberly will take care of that as our first winner. And let me do one other question here, our second one, for a chance to win these novels. Okay, let me go back here. This story here, the other one we're releasing is called Perdidos en la Traducción. And it's about two young students, one from Mexico, one from the United States, who are not very good at the language they're studying. So they think they can use their apps on their cell phone to communicate, and they don't really need to study Spanish or study English, because they can just communicate with their apps on their phones. And so the question number 2, and hopefully maybe Aaron, you would know the answer to this, but answer in the chat. What is this? This guy's name is Samuel. What is his favorite soccer team? What is his favorite soccer team?
Real Madrid.
It is. And that's from Sarah. Am I seeing that right?
Yes, you're
Yeah. All right.
correct.
So Sarah
Sarah got it right.
got
Good
it
job.
right. So Sarah wins. What, Aaron, what did we say we're doing?
So whoever wins gets one copy of each novel. Um, and we are offering them in two forms, and you can choose whichever one you want. One is as an add-on to Voces. So if you currently have a subscription to Voces, then you would get access to both titles and all or any of the titles that you have a subscription to, and you would own that copy in those subscription as long as that subscription lasts. So there's no renewal of the book itself, um, or a physical version of each copy. And in the physical version, it's enhanced. So there are links at the end of each chapter that take students to the audio, color pictures, and an activity for each chapter. And the same is in, of course, the version on Voces. So either way, you get an enhanced, full spectrum experience of the novel, and you get copies of one of each.
Awesome. And I'm impressed with how quickly both those questions were answered. There will be 8 more chances, so stick with us. We'll have the special prize at the end, which is the same as all the other prizes, but I'll say it's special so you stay to the end. So as we get into this, we're going to talk a lot about reading. We know reading is a source of input. We believe that input is how our students grow in their skills. However, engaging students in the reading process, especially when reading novels, can be a challenge for teachers. We have some of those students who love reading and they would read anything we gave them. But for others, maybe even in their first language, reading isn't their thing. And reading can be difficult in a new language. And so it's a challenge. So we want to look at this. How do we provide novels that our students want to read? And we'll talk about reading in general, but focus on novels as well. But a lot of it applies to other things as well. How do we expand a text into a cultural discussion? How do we create classroom culture in which reading is accepted and enjoyed? And then again, we'll talk a lot today about how some ways we can do that, some strategies for doing that remotely or virtually. So we're going to get into this, the importance of a healthy classroom culture, how to select and create compelling materials, how to make text comprehensible, how to vary delivery. And then we'll look into a little bit of some strategies for engagement and assessment. Assessment is a giant topic, but we'll dip into that a little bit. Anytime we do reading, there are 3 keys. It has to be compelling, it has to be comprehensible, and then we have to vary the way we do it. We can't read the same way all the time. How do we know reading is effective? And you can look at this information here later. If you look at these slides, Dr. Krashen has a lot of studies about reading, and we see some data on the importance of reading, but we also know from experience. We know that when our students read and sincerely engage with text, they grow and they get better, and they put the language together better. So we believe that reading really is powerful. And I think we don't adequately promote reading until we really believe in it. So I think that's the first step, is really understanding and believing the power of reading. And then we're motivated to really make some of these strategies work in our classes. Also, I think that if reading doesn't make our students better, we need to look at and examine our definition of better. And by that, a lot of times what happens, and I've done this too, is we'll spend a lot of time with input, we'll spend a lot of time with reading, and then we'll assess our students solely on grammar and language and vocabulary. And so we have to look at the way we're evaluating students, and if they're able to read and they're able to actually do some speaking and writing based on their reading, then that reading is making them better, and our definition of better is a better definition. Reading works in a healthy classroom culture. I talk a lot about classroom culture. Sometimes we do just webinars and workshops all about the classroom culture, but it is very important, because no text, no reading activity works unless we have some things set in place and established. Right now, a lot of us are in different situations. I am actually teaching face-to-face. We've been face-to-face since August, since we started. We've not been remote at all yet. We wear masks and we spread out and we do all the best we can. But, we kind of have this fear or this preparation for going remote, and we're starting to get more cases in Ohio, and some of our counties are getting into kind of dangerous levels. So we could go remote at any time. And for me, I've tried to take advantage of this time we've had at the beginning of the year to really establish classroom culture. I know some teachers are trying to do as much as they can on the computer so that when or if we end up going remote, that students would be able to know how to do those computer things. And I'm kind of the opposite. I kind of think let's take advantage of the time we have. Students know how to use computers. Let's take advantage of the time we have. Let's try to establish culture, classroom culture. Let's try to establish norms of how we do things so that if we do go remote, it goes better because students understand where I'm coming from and what they need to do. So some keys to that, there's students step into a new world. The classroom, whether it's real or virtual, feels like a new world. They hear things that are different. They, I use nicknames, Spanish nicknames are different. It looks different. Students are not intimidated or afraid to make mistakes. We know that languages can be intimidating and we all make mistakes and we have to deliberately not, reduce that intimidation. Students are accepted, valued, supported, and empowered by everything we do, including the things that we read. They expect to hear the target language at least 90% of the time. Reading is a great way to provide target language input. And that's not only something that happens, but it's something they expect. Like if we as a teacher were to speak English or speak the first language or something that's not the target language, it would sound weird to them because they're just so used to hearing at least 90% or more of the target language. Students are engaged the entire class time. Students are connected to global communities where target language is spoken, which that's one nice thing about readers and a lot of the novels that we have now is they are connected to cultures where those languages are spoken. And we'll look at some other things today too that make those connections. And then students understand that everything has a purpose. And again, as you look at these slides, you can click on this link and there's a reflection sheet that I do with students, usually after the first 9 weeks or so. And it just has them evaluate themselves on what they do in class. Do they, are they always engaged? Are they always answering questions? Are they reading every text that's on the screen or in front of them? Are they truly reading that and understanding that that's what their growth comes from? And really that's where their grade comes from too. Every joke, every story, every reading, everything we do has a purpose and it's making us better at Spanish. And then if you want to look at this, my lesson plan template every week, I have an L, an L, an R, a W, and an S for listening, reading, writing, and speaking. And I mark how often I'm going to do those things. And in any week, we're going to do a lot of listening, but I want to see 2 or 3 significant reading activities happening in every week because it's just an important part of what we do. Do we have that poll, Aaron?
Yes. I believe you have to start it though. So
okay.
It will be at the bottom or at the top of your screen in one of those.
Oh, yeah, polling. Okay, I want to do a little poll here. All right, I'm going to launch this poll, and I just want to see what situation you are in right now. So if you would take a second and answer this one. Are you teaching face-to-face? Are you teaching only remote? Are you doing some kind of hybrid? Are you doing both? It looks like I'm in a minority teaching face-to-face. There's a couple of us. And I think when I end this, I can share it with you. It looks like the majority of us are teaching remote classes or teaching hybrid face-to-face and remote classes. So I think that we all have let me share the results with you just so you see. So we're all, if we're not doing remote all the time or some of the times we know that's a potential for something that could happen. So good. Thank you. All right. And let's do some more trivia. Some more trivia. Okay. Let's do another. I'm going to do 2 more. And the first one, some of these are going to be silly. Some of them are significant. This one's kind of silly.
More trivia. Let's see if I win.
Here's my question. Ready? What was I doing right before we started this webinar? That's question number 3.
I don't know.
Napping, working on computer.
I can see the chat now.
Okay.
Let me give you a hint. All right. Okay. I was on my computer like right before, but I mean like before this. I live in Ohio and it is 72 degrees. Oh, wait. Laura Clark gets it right with raking. I was raking leaves, as were all my neighbors. So Laura Clark, you get that one correct. I was raking leaves.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. And all right, we're going to do one other one. And for my other one, the second one, or actually 4th one here, I want to show you, and this isn't necessarily reading related, although there's a little bit of reading that goes along with it. Where is the mute all thing?
It's in that toolbar at the
More?
top, and
Okay.
it should maybe be in your mute part. Maybe like there's a little arrow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, guys. I haven't done Zoom in a while.
If you were teaching remote, you would definitely know where that
I
is.
know, right? Like, who is this guy? He doesn't know what he's doing. All right. So now there we go. All right. So for the next one here, I'm going to show you actually, we do trivia questions in class. I do them pretty much every Tuesday. And I ask a trivia question to all 6 of my classes. Each class votes on an answer. They record their answer, and whichever class gets it right or the closest to being right gets a point. And at the end of the year, we do a pizza party or cookies or donuts or whatever for the class that wins. So I'm actually going to use one of those questions here as a trivia question for us. And again, these are very Spanish heavy, but maybe if you're not a Spanish teacher, you might still know this. So this place is Machu Picchu. That's not the question. And this is in Spanish for as we did in class. It's a historic site in Peru with ruins, Incan ruins. And it's popular tourists and all over the world, but thanks to the pandemic, it was the government closed it in March of 2020 to tourists. Recently, they said yesterday, because the day we did this was the day after, they opened Machu Picchu for the first time since it was closed for the pandemic. How many tourists visited Machu Picchu in that first day that it was open? That's my question. That's my trivia question. How many tourists visited Machu Picchu the first day it opened recently? And Sarah Rodeni has it right. The answer is 1. There was 1 tourist. Lots of guesses there. Yes, there was 1 tourist. So we did this in class, and then we looked at this, and we read this article about this guy. He was actually from Japan. He came to Machu Picchu to visit when the pandemic started. He ended up getting stuck in Peru. Then he was just about to go back to Japan, and the minister of tourism actually opened it up just for him. So 1 tourist visited Machu Picchu the day it opened back to tourists. So Sarah is our next winner. There'll be more chances. All right. So 3 keys to success with reading novels. Again, compelling text, comprehensible text, and variation of our delivery. We need to have interesting, compelling text. We just don't have time to read texts that are boring. And sometimes we'll talk about this in a second. Sometimes we have power to make that decision. Sometimes we don't. The danger of a text that's not interesting is that students, if it's not interesting, if it's not compelling to them, then they're not going to make the effort to comprehend it. And now it's just completely wasted time, because if they don't understand it, then there's really no value. Also, students will disengage from reading altogether. So if we're going to read things that are not interesting, then students are going to say, man, I really don't like reading in Spanish or French or German. And so they're not going to read other things that maybe would be interesting. They don't take our classes. If we spend a lot of time reading and the texts are not interesting, then they don't take our classes, because that's a big part of our class. And for me, as I teach Spanish 3 and 4 and 5, and those are all very elective classes, I have to have students have to want to do that. And so we have to make sure we're reading engaging texts. Now, compelling texts contain humor, relevance, unexpected, incredible details, or debate. Humor can be difficult. The new Perdidos en la Traducción has some humor in it. The tough thing with humor and novels is what's funny to my class isn't necessarily funny to your class. But some things are funny, and some of the shorter readings we do have humor in them. Relevance, if it's connected to students, then it's compelling. Unexpected, incredible details. The Bella Durmiente one, the other new one about the girl in Peru and working in the mining town, there are some incredible details, which are really based on true things about that place and the people who live there. And it's a compelling story because it's so incredible. And then another one is debate. I have this other story book that Aaron mentioned, Sobrevivientes, and it's about the team from Uruguay who was in a plane crash, and there are some debates in there of what would you do being in their situation. And it's not funny, and it's not necessarily relevant. It's nothing that we go through, but the debate factor of it makes it compelling and interesting to students. So how do we know if a text is compelling? Well, there are 2 keys here. One is that we must spend time previewing the text. We need to know what the students are reading. And if it's novels, and if we're doing a class library of novels, then, it may take a while. I don't think I've read every novel in my class library right now, but we need to work on that. We need to make sure that we are reading those texts and knowing what they are, so that we know, then we can know to connect them with students. And then the other key is we have to know our students. We have to know personally what interests them, what kind of kids they are, what might be interesting to them, so that we can start to put those connections together and try to get them texts that are compelling. What about this? And this may be the question you have. What if I don't have a choice about what my students read? And that happens. You have a student, you have a class set of a novel, or a different teacher in your department made the decision on what you're going to read, or for whatever reason, you don't get to pick what you read. It happens. Number one is just this fight the good fight just means when you're talking with your administrators or you're talking with your department leaders and you don't like, and you don't think a story is compelling, continue to respectfully say, hey, let's look at some other options, continue to push for texts that are more compelling. Adapt, edit, skip, and summarize sections. If there are long, boring sections, just summarize them and skip them and move on to the parts that are more compelling. If you have the ability to adapt, and we'll talk about that in a little bit, you can make some adaptations or edits as well. Be sure to make text comprehensible. If it, for some reason, is a story or some kind of reading and students, it's not so compelling or interesting to them, make sure that they can at least understand it. Because again, if it's not interesting and they're not comprehending it, then it's just wasted time and you could be doing something else. Try to connect boring text to interesting activities. So if we're reading something and maybe it's not the most interesting, there are some enhancement, some additional activities we can do with that are interesting and fun and compelling or debatable or whatever, and try to connect those to the boring text to keep the reading experience still compelling. And then add very interesting readings to rekindle the desire to read. So if you have to read something and it's not the most interesting, or students kind of groan and grumble about it, then maybe the next thing you read, or in between something else you read, is very funny or interesting or relevant or debatable or whatever, so that they still like reading, even if the one text maybe doesn't excite them as much as others do. Some activities to make novels more compelling. What would you do? Put students in the story, ask them what they would do, ask students how you could change the story if it's not interesting, or even if it is, and there's a great opportunity for that. How could we change the story? Use actors, act things out as you read. Use images, show pictures of things as you read, draw pictures of things, try to make it a little more compelling the best you can. And then find a balance between authentic and non-authentic text. A lot of the novels that we offer, a lot of the novels that we read in classes are non-authentic. And I think that's fine. There is a place for non-authentic text because, they can really focus in on cultural themes. It can be language that students understand, and that's fine. But if we're going to spend a lot of time reading non-authentic novels, then we want to balance that out with doing some other things that are authentic. And I also believe, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time on these slides because I have here kind of my levels 1 through 5. What types of things, let me show you level 1. What types of things go on in the classes? And I think as you go up, you start to see more and more authentic and less non-authentic text. And again, we want to find that balance. But, especially early on at low levels, a lot of non-authentic stories, things like that. These novels are great. And then as you go up, you start to add in some authentic things, and you maybe adapt what you do with those. And then we start to, for me, we're an AP program, so this is kind of specific to our program. We start to see AP style assessments that go along with the texts that we read. As we get into level 4, lots, we start to see, we're still some teacher created non-authentic text, but we start to get into a lot more authentic things. So again, finding that balance is important as we read in our compelling texts. Okay, ready for more trivia questions? Let's do 2 more. All right, yeah, this was another one we did in class recently. This guy, and I didn't tell him the name of this guy as we did it, and I just said, this guy is an actor. Let's see what I said. Yeah, it was his voice. I'm sorry. He voiced the protagonist of the English and Spanish version of a very successful movie, the most popular movie in the history of Mexico. the movie is also very popular in the United States. What was the name of that movie? So that's the question. What was the name of the movie that this guy was the voice for? And I will look at the chat here, and I'm guessing, wow, lots of people got it very quickly. And Jane, it looks like Jane, Coco is right. Jane Ellis wins. Jane Ellis wins for Coco. It was Coco. And actually, this is one that all my classes got right. They all got it right, which I don't care. If they all get it right, no problem. Because then a lot of times when we do trivia, the next day we kind of dig into the culture a little more. And trivia is one of these things where we kind of sneak in a little reading. So like the kids get into this because of the game. Like they want to win the points. They want to win the pizza party. Even if they don't have any, even if they're way behind it, they don't want to win pizza. They still want to try to win every week. And for me, I'm getting extra input. I'm getting extra culture into it. And like things like this as we're reading as we do it. So after the next day, we actually watched this video and we got to see him do some of the parts from Coco. And then I gave every class a point. All right, next one more. This is another, oh yeah, there we go. Coco, he was from Coco. He was that guy's Hector in Coco. That's Gael Garcia Bernal, right? Yeah. Yeah. Okay. And all right, here's the other one. This is another silly one about me. This is my dog, Rusty. This is my cat, River. The question is, how old is my dog? That's the question. How old is my dog, Rusty? Whoever gets it right first wins. Oh, wow. Oh, we got lots of close answers, but nobody's exactly right yet. Oh, there we go. Maria Rayburn. Hi, Maria.
Yay, thank you.
Rusty is 12 years old. He's an old boy. The cat's like 6 months old, I think. Thank you though, Laura. But no, Rusty is 12 years old. So that's Maria gets another prize for that. That's Rusty and River. They got to be part of this. That's awesome. All right. So next key is that our novels and our reading be comprehensible. One thing that we can do if we're reading something and there's too much of it is not comprehensible is we can adapt it. And with these add-ons, with Voces Digital and the novels and the stories, well, really anything in Voces, but even with the novels and the stories, we can adapt them. So let me back out of this for 1 second. So if I open up this book here, this is the Perdidos en la Traducción story. If I have it digitally as an add-on and my students are going to be reading it digitally, which works really well if you're teaching remotely, and this is my text, and we'll talk about some strategies if there's certain things here they don't know, but we want to leave them in there. But if there's something in here that my students don't know, or there's a whole chunk I don't need or whatever, with Voces, you can go through and you can edit and adapt the text, which I think is awesome. And I've done that a lot with all the different Voces texts, but you can change it. Like sometimes maybe you wanted this word, if you're a Spanish teacher, to be prueba instead of examen, or you wanted to preocupada instead of nerviosa, or whatever. You wanted to change different vocabulary words. You wanted to cut parts out, add parts, or whatever. You can adapt the reading. And for me, that was something that was significant when I kind of realized, hey, if I'm reading something and let me open this one. This is not a novel, but it's just an article we read in class once. And like, I could just write things above it. I could cut parts out. I could underline, I could number paragraphs. I can adapt the text to make it comprehensible for my students. Now, again, we do that less and less as we go up because we want students to be able to make meaning out of things that are not 100% comprehensible when we get into AP. But as you're getting up there, adapting and editing text makes it more comprehensible. Here's another one. Oh, sorry, I skipped. Another idea to make it more comprehensible is to preview it. Previewing is a great way to get the main idea into students' heads before they read it. It reduces intimidation a little bit, and it helps them understand when they go to read. So this is an older story I have, or a book I have, Carterista de Pamplona. This is chapter 14. It's not in English. It's a Spanish book, but I translated this to English for this. And so this is what we might look at before we read chapter 14. And it does two things. One, it gets the students to understand what's going on. And two, it kind of builds a little suspense and interest for them. So Arturo and Claro are running hand in hand, leading lost that word. The procession of frightened tourists and angry bulls. Because all roads were blocked, their only option was to enter the Plaza de Navarra. The first floor of the building was filled with smoke and chaos. Some people were yelling fire, while others yelled bulls. Arthur grabbed the rocket and was headed for the exit when Clara let go of his hand. He was searching for her in the dark with Camilo yelling in his earpiece, Arturo, get out of there and leave her. Arturo was reaching for her when boom. So if we read something like that, again, in Spanish, and we make sure they understand that, we also kind of spark some interest in it. That's not the entire chapter. That's just a preview of the chapter. Along those same lines is the idea of embedded readings. And some of you probably have done embedded readings a lot. Some of you maybe have never done it. Embedded reading is the same kind of idea, but it's basically that we take a text. Let's say we're going to take a chapter out of a book, and we're going to break it down. And we're going to read a very simple version of it first, and then we're going to read another version where we maybe add a little bit, and then we're going to maybe read another version, and then we get to the chapter. But we've seen it broken down so many times that it's comprehensible. Here's another one of my novels called La Novia Perfecta. I believe this is an English translation. Yeah, the book again is in Spanish. This is just an English translation for demonstration. So here's chapter 1. Okay. And it's, it's a lot of text. And so maybe before I show this text to my students, I want to just break it down to the essentials. So I go through and I cut out, and this is what I would do. I would cut out these parts. I would keep these parts and cut out everything else. He is a 27-year-old. He was born in Puebla, Mexico. He can speak Spanish and English. He's not happy. He feels very lonely. He needs a girlfriend. He was bored and wanted to go out with a friend. He got sad. No one wanted to hang out with him. He needed a girlfriend. Boom. Like if I were to just read you those sentences, you get the gist of the beginning of the story. Everything else is just added details. So that would be all you see in bold there would be version 1. So it's, it's 6 or 7 sentences. It could fit on one screen. A lot of times I do my first version on a screen rather than printing it out. If you're doing virtual, it can be one slide or whatever. And then our next version, we're going to add a little bit more and we're going to read it again, making sure we understood everything in version 1. Then we go on to version 2, and maybe these things that are in red, we add that. So we start to add some details, maybe some examples of some of the dialogue. And then when we get to the final text, now we already understand most of what's going on. We've seen most of the vocabulary, and now it's just some of these details. I'm less intimidated. I know basically, and context makes a huge difference in all language. So as I have that context, it makes it easier to read that. So there's a lot out there about embedded readings. There's different ways to do it. It's really a great way to do novels, I think, because a lot of times with the novel, if you're looking at if you have a print version and it's not an add-on, a digital version, and you can't adapt it, then you have to do whatever you can to make it comprehensible. So embedded readings are a great way to do that. Visuals are a great way to make things comprehensible, and they also slow us down sometimes. Actors, acting things out, readers theater, we call it sometimes, where students are reading different parts and acting things out. Images, using photos, using drawing, teacher drawing, making the students draw. I do a lot of drawing, and it just kind of connects that artistic part of our mind to the text. Yeah, so any kind of visuals that we can add. And again, you can look at these links later on if you want and see some examples of some of the drawing. A lot of times when I do drawing myself, it again slows it down, and it just kind of allows me we can read a text, and then I can kind of point to and we can all see the main ideas of it. And then another thing that is really helpful is to pre-teach language before you see the text. When we look at a text, let's say we're looking at a chapter of one of these novels, we're looking at anything we're going to read. When we think about unknown vocabulary, there are 4 types of unknown vocabulary. And 1 and 2 are kind of similar. There's some vocabulary that a student wouldn't know, but it's really not important. There are some that they may not know, but with the context, they can figure it out. There are some words that they couldn't figure out with context, and it is important, and they need it for comprehension. And then there are some that, again, they don't know it, they need it for comprehension, but it's also very, very valuable language. It's something that's high frequency. It's something that's very useful. And it's something that I want the students to take from the reading. And as you can guess, there's different things we're going to do with these different types of vocabulary. If it's not important, if I'm looking at a text and I don't think there's anything important in it, I'm going to leave it. And train students not to worry about it. Train them that, hey, if you come across one little word and it doesn't change any of the meaning, don't panic. Keep reading. Or I could remove that, or I could define it. If it's understood with context, again, I want to leave it, but I want to kind of start to practice this skill with students. And so what I do a lot of times is at the end of a reading, I will say, hey, look at these words. What do you think they mean? And they may be words that students have never seen before, and they have to go back and they have to use the context to figure out what those words might mean. Practice that skill, get them to understand that context helps them when they read. If it's something that's necessary for comprehension, then we need to define it. And you can define it within the text. If it's one of these digital stories through Voces, you can put a little parentheses or a hover over and make that word show up. You can project it on the screen as they're reading, or give them a printout or an email or whatever. You can do that before they're reading. You can give them notes where they define those words, but you have to do something to where they understand the meaning of that word before they read or as they read. And then finally, if it's high frequency, if it's something that's valuable for future use, not only do we need to define it, but we need to internalize it, meaning we need to use it in personal situations. We're going to use it. We're going to practice it. We're going to repeat it over and over and over and over again before we ever read it. And then we read it. And then afterwards, we're going to maybe practice it, use it, personalize it as much as we can, reuse it. I'm going to assess it. Those type of words are awesome, because they need them to understand, and then they can use them afterwards. And that's a great use of the language. So here's, let me back up and go over here again. So again, I'm looking at a text. Let me just open a different chapter maybe. And I don't teach level 1. This is probably a level 1 story. And so I would look at this chapter first before my students read it. And I would go through and I would find what words they might not know. And then I would decide, is it something that I just want to leave? Do I want to define it? Or do I want to really use it and internalize it and personalize it so they will have it with them after we're done with reading this chapter? This is a strange part of the story. It's a good story, though. I had an example here. This is not from a novel. This is from a different Voce story, but this kind of gives that idea. I went through a story that I knew my students were going to read. I pulled out all these different vocabulary phrases and structures that they wouldn't know. And then I had to decide, okay, which of these phrases is high frequency and very useful, and I really want to focus on before we read. And the thing is, every teacher would look at this list, and you can look at the English or the Spanish and maybe have different ideas based on what your students already know and based on what is really important and compelling and interesting to them. What I pulled out was Iba'a was going to, because I thought that was a very powerful thing. Embarazada is something that is compelling to students. Ojalá pudiera is another powerful phrase. And that's something that they've been able to use after we read that story over and over again, because we repped it a lot. Pase lo que pase is a great phrase, whatever happens. And so we focused on those things. So again, we have to spend time previewing the text to know what our students need. We have to know our students to know what they can comprehend and not comprehend. Those are, just as with compelling text, with comprehensible text, those are essential. We know the text, we know our students, and we can start to prepare them to comprehend. All right, ready? Let's do 2 more trivia questions. Where are we at on? Okay, 2 more trivia questions to win some more prizes. And this is another one we did in class. And this is Roberto Clemente. Did some of you already answer that? Do you think that was the question? Well, when they were still playing baseball a month ago or so, the Pittsburgh Pirates, who he played for, one day they all wore it was September 9th. They all wore his number to honor him on Roberto Clemente Day. What number did every member of the Pittsburgh Pirates wear that day on September 9th? Let's see. Nobody's no. Rosanna Brewer, 21 is correct. So Rosanna wins. Roberto Clemente was number 21, and they all wore his number. Good job, Rosanna. And we had to dress up as Halloween people from our subjects on Halloween, and I dressed up as Roberto Clemente. I made a makeshift jersey of him. All right. And yeah, so then the next day we actually watched this video about him. We talked about him. He was really an incredible person, not just in baseball, but in his humanitarian aid for all of Latin America. And so we kind of talked about him. Again, that was a fun way to incorporate culture in the class. All right. And here is one other one. Sometimes we do this for class for trivia. I'll just put up a question or a picture or a few pictures and ask. And here's your trivia question. What country is this? Where is this country? Where is this picture taken? What country is this? And you have to answer fast. Nobody's right yet, though. Nobody's right yet. Nope. No. I think that maybe. Nope, not yet. Not yet. I think somebody had it, but maybe spelled wrong. But it was somebody who already won. So keep going. Keep going. It's a South American country. Landlocked. There we go. Michelle Bloom, chef. Bolivia. It's Bolivia. It's a picture from Bolivia. There we go. So Michelle Bloom, chef, gets Bolivia. Awesome. I think we have two more later on. All right. Our last key here to reading success is that we vary delivery. We vary the way we read. And all right. So when we talk about novels, this is a question I get a lot when people ask about novels, is how do you do a novel? And there's really lots of different ways to do it, and you should do it different ways. One way is that the novel is class. So for a week or two or a month or whatever, this novel is going to be the bulk of what we do in class. We're going to focus. We have a concentrated focus on the reading and the content of the novel, and that is what we do. We practice the vocabulary, we use the vocabulary, we assess it, we do lots of things with those structures. Another option is that the novel is part of class. And a lot of times when we do this, we spread it out. So we're doing other things, but then maybe every Thursday and Friday, we read the novel, or a couple days a week, we read the novel, or it's homework to do outside of class or virtual class. We're doing the novel, and we just kind of do that for a long time. And that gives you more time to kind of prepare for some of the language and students to grow their skills and comprehend a little easier as you do the novel. When it comes to preparation, I can prepare students for the entire novel, which means I'm probably going to read it later in the year because I've had more time to do a lot of vocabulary prep, or I can prepare them as they go, chapter by chapter, section by section. I can do some of those vocabulary and grammar things to get them ready for what they're about to see. So again, there's lots of ways to do it, and you should vary the way you do that. There's a link here to an article I wrote about ways to avoid fatigue and increase engagement with reading. Check that out if you get a chance. Screencast. Now, this is kind of interesting because, a lot of us are doing remote learning right now. And so kind of everything feels like a screencast. But this is still something you can do with students, whether you're in class or not, is sometimes when you're reading, break it up by reading with a video. And there's different ways you can do this. And basically, I record myself reading a text. And sometimes they will just listen, and I'll put images up. And sometimes they'll see the text on the video as they do it. So if you're doing a remote virtual class and basically you assign reading to students sometimes, maybe they're doing it outside of your time together, that's great. But this is a way to do that. Let me show you very quickly a couple examples of this. We don't need to see that. This one.
Los sobrevivientes, capítulos 9, pudo creer. Nando parado, se tu hermano, tu madre está muerta y tu hermana.
So this is an example of one where the text is not on the screen. They're seeing some images. As you saw there, I had defined a word for them, helping them understand some things. I actually included parts of a video in this. And then I did include a little text later on. There's some images.
Nando trató de animar a sus compañeros.
Help them understand. The other way you can do it is actually include the text in the video.
Los sobrevivientes. Al avión. Con mucho gusto, Antonio los dejó, bajó la montaña y volvió.
So now they are seeing the text, hearing the text. And then same thing on this one, I would go through sometimes and I would add some images, I would add some videos. I could even stop and just explain some things in English as they did it. So this is something that if you're doing remote and you're having students read, another thing you could do with this is put it in Edpuzzle or put it in one of those programs where you can see the students' progress. And so you know that they actually at least read it or spent the time with it. And you can go at your pace and you can help them comprehend, and you can make it just a varied way to do it, make it kind of interesting for the students. I like screencasts for a lot of different things, but I've really found it a great way to do some reading. And there's some more examples there for you. Some different, there's an example there in Edpuzzle as well. If you're new to screencast, there's some links there to explain how to do screencasting. I know a lot of us are becoming experts on those type of things recently, and we probably never want to do it again if we could avoid it, but it is very helpful and very good. Skipping and summarizing is something I mentioned earlier. There's an example here from a book, but sometimes again, if you don't have time or a book is getting too long or whatever, you just summarize chapters 13, 14, and 15, and then continue reading. Just remember, you have the ability and the power to do that. And then free voluntary reading is, again, a varied way we read. This is a paper. Now, we haven't done this yet this year. This is something you could do remote and you could do in class. I haven't done a lot with my classroom library this year because I can't have students touching books and then someone else touching the same book. And it's just one of the many things that we've had to adapt this year, being in class. But, the idea was with free voluntary reading or silent sustained reading is students are picking what they want to read. There are digital, you can have them read websites. There are digital versions of books now with Voces and these add-ons, you could have them picking different books to read there. And they have a lot of freedom as they read. What I had students do is when they finished a book, they did an English summary. And I would have them, basically one side would be their review, how many stars, what they liked, without spoiling the ending or anything. The other side would be some just simple questions that they could even answer in English about the book. And so then I could hang up this side so other students could get an idea of what books their classmates liked and didn't like, and some ideas of what was going on there. And then I could read this, but when I would hang it up on the wall, this wouldn't spoil anything for someone who is going to read that book. So free voluntary reading is great. It is possible to do in a remote setting, and it's great to do in class as well. And then various assessment and accountability, same idea. We reviewed for pleasure. We would review simple comprehension assessments. Sometimes we do extended things. We do writing or speaking, an extension of a reading from a different point of view, a new ending, what happens next, interview a character. This cause and effect is basically, you list certain causes from the chapter, and the students have to write what the effect was, or you write the effect, they have to write the cause. There are lots of things we can do with those, and Voces has a lot of those things. As Aaron was saying, the novels are enhanced with questions that go along with them. And then assessment, again, I said I would just get into assessment just a little. One thing I think about assessment is, a lot of times we think of assessment as how can I hold students accountable? And I think we just have to change our mindset a little bit and think, how do I make students want to read? How do I get them to understand and be interested in the text so that they want to read? And if I can start to do that a little more, that makes holding them accountable a lot easier. So kind of keep that in mind. And then the other thing is, if we really believe that assessment is growing our students' skills, then when we assess speaking and writing, we're assessing their reading, because if they're growing in those skills, it's because they're reading. So if we have that kind of connected idea of all assessment, then we, again, start to think that everything has a purpose. Again, you can click on these links. I use Google Forms a lot. This is an, individual reading comprehension activity. And again, a lot of the Voces titles now kind of have this. They have questions that go along with every chapter. This would be like if a student was reading that book, like Independent Study or something, and there's just something that goes along with every chapter. But again, if it's a Voces title, a lot of those are in a much better produced format than this example. AP, because we do AP at my school, when we look at comprehension questions for reading, I like to try to mimic AP questions, even if it's not as complex a question as an AP exam would be. The style of question, if you can start to do that early on, that makes a big difference. Later on, there's different questions there you can do for that. And then when we do writing and we speaking as a response to reading, I like to offer multiple prompts. Don't just say, hey, rewrite the chapter or write a different ending. Give students some different options. What happens next, change the ending, write from a different point of view, write an interview, and so on. Give them some room to kind of choose different prompts when they write. All right, so here's our last one. Last two, right, Aaron? We have two more, right? I'm not giving away more than we have. So here we go. Two more questions. Number 9 in the chat. Let me open the chat here. Uh-oh, it's up here. What Latin American country has the highest literacy rate? What Latin American country has the high? I thought Cuba too. It's not Cuba, but it's Argentina. Where does it? Jane Ellis, Argentina. And I don't know if Jane already won. And so Jill, did you win already? So if so, Jill.
It's okay. I'm letting people win twice.
All right, cool. I was going to ask you that. That was one of the questions I forgot to ask you. So Jane, good job.
Yeah.
Good job, Jill. It is Argentina. And then I have one last question, and you need to see me for this, but you can see me, right? This is another book that I have from, let me actually just do this. There you go. See this book? Okay. Bajo el Agua is another novel that Voces has produced. Where is this book set? And either you know from you read it or you can see the cover. Where is the setting for Bajo el Agua? And good job, Linda. Linda got it right with Costa Rica, or Linda was answering the last question with Costa Rica and she lucked into it. But no, good job, Linda. It is Costa Rica. That is correct. Bajo el Agua is a story set in Costa Rica. Let me go back to my screen here. And awesome job on the trivia. Lots of quick answers. So there is a website and an email. You can contact me if you're watching this live or watching it later and you have some questions. Again, we're going through that kind of quickly, and we'll make these slides available as well. And then I don't know, we want to take a few minutes for questions and answers. I think we're a small enough group that if you have a question, you could probably just unmute yourself and ask. And I don't know if there've been others in the chat, other questions.
Well, someone asked what Textivate is, and I put the link there, but
cool.
Maybe you want to just say a few words about it.
Textivate is a program that you have to purchase. Our school, our department has purchased it, but it's a vocabulary practice, and it can also be used for storytelling text practice. Basically, it creates games out of any text you put into it. So, and you can do challenges with students and things like that, and it's fun. But it is one that is a purchase program. But we've had it for 4 or 5 years and really, and it's one of those that programs that works well no matter what kind of teacher. If you're a more traditional teacher, vocabulary practice. If you're more of a CI story-based teacher, you can do a lot of things with it as well.
Bryan, do you think you could share your slides right now in chat? Is that possible? And if not, you just email them to me later and I'll make sure that I send out a link to the slides to everyone.
Yeah.
And then you have Sarah had a question.
Okay. Oops. Sarah, is it written or did you? Okay. How long do you typically spend? Sorry. How long do you typically spend reading with your classes, or does it depend on the class novel? Yeah, it does depend on the class. I don't know if you mean within any day or within a week. I don't really, it's probably never more than 15, 20 minutes in a day. And we do lots of different like little reading things throughout the week. Sometimes we'll do more extended reading, but it's never an entire class. And even if it's free voluntary reading where students are picking what they read, it's never the entire class. So, we try to read all the time. We try to read a few times during the week, but it's never for a long, long period of time. Because we talked about varying reading, but I also think you need to vary everything you do in class. So, listening, writing, speaking, reading, music, all those different things you have to kind of, I do a lot of bouncing around. Structured, but bouncing around.
Well, while we're waiting maybe for more questions or not, I just want to reiterate that um, that those people who won, I will be in touch with you unless you want to email me. I mean, either way, I'll be in touch with you. And you can let me know which version of the books you'd like. Um, and just so everyone knows, um, the two books, Bella Durmiente and Perdidos de Traducción.
En la
I
traducción.
cannot pronounce. Yeah. um, they're both now available through Voces. You can either purchase physical copies that are like, like that you can hold in your hand, but they all have URLs, like our little website, like QR codes and stuff at the end of each chapter that take students to color versions of the photographs, audio for each chapter, and an activity. So they're enhanced. I read Bella Durmiente. I mean, it's been like a few months now, but it's such an amazing book. Like, it's one of those cultural journey books. Like, I learned so much through reading it about what those miners go through and like different history. So it's just I highly recommend that book. And the level 1 book is definitely level 1, and it's funny, and I think students will really get a kick out of it and like identify with the characters. So, and then we're also making them available as add-ons, and that's a new thing that Voces is offering. If you do have a subscription to Voces, you can add on one of many different readers that we're making available, and we'll be adding more. And they just like go into your title seamlessly, just like any other content. You'll be able to edit to that content, assign it to students. You'll keep it for the duration of your subscription. So yeah, just know that that's available. And if you guys have any questions, my email. So, oh, and Bryan put the link to his presentation in the chat too. So thank you.
Yeah, that's, and I'll email it to you as well, Aaron, and it is there in the chat. That's the slides. And Jane asked about what level is Bella Durmiente. And we have it in level 4 in Voces, right? It is probably a level 4. So it is a neat story. There's a lot going on. There's a lot to the setting there in Rinconada and what happens. And, but it is a little complex because there's so much going on. And so for upper level students, it's really a great story, but it is one that, it's up there.
But do you think maybe for heritage speakers?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. Because I teach heritage speakers 1.
Yep.
And it's hard to find a story that's interesting for them.
Yeah, I think it would be great for heritage speakers because the story is so interesting. And then you can just the pictures, and you can get into, and there's lots of articles and videos done about the place and the actual story. And it's really interesting. And all of the, all the titles that Voces puts out have been proofed and have been edited, by native speakers. And so the language and the culture are accurate. So I think for heritage speakers, it would be a good story.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Does anybody else have questions? Our numbers actually grew here at the end. I thought we'd be down to 2 or 3 people. I don't know. There's beautiful weather here in Ohio. Yeah. I thought so I appreciate so much that you stayed.
Oh, there's one more question. Kimberly asked, do any of you, and I think, do any teachers here, as well as you, Bryan, do any of you do more than one book in Spanish 1?
Oh, I didn't see the Spanish 1. I haven't taught Spanish 1 in a long time, so I'm not going to answer that. I don't know if anybody else has either in the chat or if you want to just kind of share one each semester. I think that's a good idea, one per semester. Yeah. Looks like, one, maybe 1 or 2.
Yeah, in Voces, we have a really short Day of the Dead reader in level 1 and 2, actually. It's just a little more complex. And so it's like a nice, maybe introduction to reading something a little bit more than just a short story, because it's, kind of in between. And then we have a longer level 1 story as well by Rachel Emery. So yes, Las Mariposas, Jane.
Mariposas.
I just did your Las Mariposas. And I used Pear Deck for part of it.
Yeah.
My colleague and I, we put parts into Pear Deck, and we had them draw on some of the slides. So when they were learning the word, because I teach Spanish too, a low 2 for this class. and they were drawing on the slides, and then they had to circle certain elements from Day of the Dead in some of the pictures. Instead of having just question and answer or write the number on the slide, the evidence in the text of where you would find the answer. So it really lent itself well to that, your artwork.
Yeah, that's really good to know. And yeah, originally we made that really like focus on the physical version as like a storytelling reader that a teacher could like, do in class and all pre-COVID. But I'm glad
Class, what's that?
That's a really good idea though, to use Pear Deck for that. I'm glad it worked out.
It did. Thank you.
Any other questions? Well, thank you all for coming, and thank you, Bryan, for presenting. And, like just hearing all your options, I feel like there's so much that teachers can do with stories, and it's just like such a source of, material to use in any language class. So thank you. So many good ideas. If anyone has any questions about anything or needs access, you feel free to email me. I'll be emailing winners tomorrow morning, to be honest. I'm probably going to go enjoy the remaining
as some of you are saying, we have about 20 minutes and it is dark, so. Which means we don't have to go rake leaves anymore, but yeah.
But thank you all for coming, and I'll send out a recording and everything, and stay tuned, because we're going to be doing more webinars and just keeping the ideas going. So you guys have a wonderful night.
Thank you.
Thanks, Bryan, again. Bye-bye.